It was nearly 1 in the morning when the storm finally broke over Columbus, the kind that made the streets shine like black glass and turned every window into a trembling mirror. Whitmore Grill was minutes from closing the lights low, the dining room half empty, the smell of fryer oil fading into something tired and metallic. I was wiping down the last booth when the door creaked open, a gust of cold air sweeping across the floor. An older man stepped inside, soaked from head to toe. His jacket clung to him like wet paper, his hands trembling as he removed a dripping cap. His gray hair was plastered to his forehead, and for a moment he just stood there blinking, as if unsure whether he was allowed to walk any farther. Beth glanced up from her phone and rolled her eyes. Jason didn't even bother looking. Manager Tom lifted his head long enough to mutter something under his breath before going back to counting receipts. It hit me instantly what they all assumed: too wet, too worn, too not worth serving. The kind of customer people pretended not to see. I grabbed a clean towel and stepped toward him before my brain could argue. "Evening, sir," I said, keeping my voice warm. "You can sit anywhere you like." He blinked at me startled, as if kindness had weight, and I had just handed him a whole armful of it. "A booth is fine, miss," he whispered. "By the window, if that's all right." "Of course." I guided him to the booth nearest the heater and poured a fresh cup of coffee, the smell rising in soft curls between us. His fingers trembled around the warm mug. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Most places don't bother at this hour." I smiled and said I'd be right back with something warm to eat. But before I could turn, Tom barked from behind the counter, his voice sharp enough to cut through the storm outside. "Emma, why are you wasting time on trash customers?" The room froze. The old man flinched. My stomach tightened, but I forced my expression to stay calm. "He's a guest, Tom," I said carefully. "I'm doing my job." "No, you're babysitting a zero-tip table while real customers are waiting." The couple at the table nearest us looked over the woman, raising her brow with a smirk. "She should focus on real customers," she said loudly to her husband. "We pay the bills here." Her tone wasn't even angry, just condescending, like she was rating a movie she didn't like. Heat rose in my chest, but I swallowed it down. The old man's eyes were wet now, and I couldn't tell if it was from the rain on his face or the humiliation dripping through the room. I set the coffee gently in front of him, pretending not to hear any of it. "I'll bring you hot soup, sir. Give me just a moment." He nodded, voice small. "Thank you, miss." Back in the kitchen, I grabbed a bowl and ladled steaming chicken soup, trying to steady my hands. Beth tossed a menu onto the counter with a loud slap and scoffed. "She's trying to be Mother Teresa again." Jason chuckled without looking up. I ignored them and carried the bowl back out. The old man straightened when he saw me approaching, as if bracing himself for another insult. Instead, I slid the bowl in front of him and said softly, "Eat slowly. It's really hot." He looked at me with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You didn't have to do this," he whispered. I met his eyes. Yes, I did. For a second, something flickered in his expression, like a man remembering what dignity felt like. But the moment shattered when Tom marched over to me, waving a sheet of paper. "Emma, office, now." I followed him behind the counter, my heart already dropping. He shoved a printed form toward me. "Sign it. Violating conduct standards." I stared at it. What conduct? Serving customers. He leaned close, breath thick with anger. "Don't play dumb. We both know you're a problem here, always trying to be some kind of hero. This place needs efficiency, not charity." My throat tightened. "Tom, it's raining. He needed help. And we're a restaurant. Our job is literally to feed people." He smirked. "You want to argue with me? Fine. You're done. Clock out and go." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're firing me right here in front of customers." He shrugged. "There are plenty of girls who can replace you by tomorrow." My vision blurred for a moment, not from tears, but from shock so sharp it felt like a slap. I set my apron on the counter and stepped back into the dining room. The old man saw my empty hands. He pushed himself up, panic flickering across his face. "Wait." Miss Tom stepped in front of him. "Sir, stay out of this." The old man froze, shoulders folding inward. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault. I wanted to tell him I'd be fine. But the truth was, I didn't know if I would be. I pushed through the door and stepped into the storm. Rain hammered down so hard it blurred the parking lot lights into long, trembling streaks. As I turned back for a last glance, I saw him through the glass, sitting alone, coffee cooling, hands folded as if in prayer. He looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Not pity, not fear, just helplessness mixed with something heavier, something like regret. He lifted his hand slightly as if to say something, but Tom moved behind him, blocking my view. That was the moment the door clicked shut behind me, sealing me outside in the rain. And just like that, everything I didn't know yet began to unfold. People always assume a collapse begins with a dramatic moment, a loud shatter, a single catastrophic event. But mine didn't start that way. Mine began quietly long before the stormy night at Whitmore Grill. In truth, my life had been collapsing in small pieces for years, like a roof sagging plank by plank until the whole thing finally caves in. I used to think I was strong because I kept pushing through everything. Now I understand I was simply surviving. My name is Emma Clark. I am 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I have worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a small cleaning service, nights waiting tables at restaurants that changed their managers more often than they changed their menus. My mother has been sick for years with a chronic heart condition that drains both her strength and our savings. My younger sister moved out of state after getting married, and even though she tries to help when she can, most of the burden rests on me. Rent, medication, groceries, hospital visits, car repairs. Every month felt like balancing on thin ice while carrying someone on my back. When people saw me at Whitmore Grill, they saw a waitress, a uniform, a tired smile. They didn't see the woman who left home at 6 a.m. to scrub office kitchens before the sun came up. They didn't see me eating granola bars in my car during 10-minute breaks. They didn't see the late-night pharmacy runs after double shifts. They certainly didn't see the dreams I used to have. Before life got heavy, I once wanted to work in human resources. I loved the idea of understanding people, helping them grow, being the person who made sure workplaces were kind. I even took community college classes, getting within reach of a degree. But when Mom's condition worsened, I withdrew from school to work full-time. Mom kept apologizing, and I kept telling her not to. "You don't owe me an apology for being alive," I would tell her. "We do what families do." But the truth was, some nights alone in my room, exhaustion wrapped around me so tightly it felt like a weight on my chest. The world kept moving while I stayed in place. And when you work in restaurants long enough, you learn the hierarchy no one talks about. The managers who think kindness is optional, the servers who chase tips like prey, the customers who look at your name tag before they look at your face, the older couples who call you sweetheart with the tone people use for pets, the rich businessmen who snap fingers for water refills and never say thank you, and the ones who treat you like furniture unless they want something. I learned early that restaurants are stages and servers are actors. You smile when you're tired. You apologize when nothing is your fault. You pretend you don't hear comments that sting. I became good at swallowing things whole, good at being invisible when necessary. But invisibility has a cost. There were little humiliations that piled up over the years. One customer waved his hand at me like shooing a fly because he thought I didn't bring enough napkins. Another once said, "Honey, if you smiled more, maybe men would tip you better." A colleague I trained got promoted before me because he fit the image better. A manager told me, "You're dependable, Emma, but not exactly leadership material." All those moments carved into me small cuts that never bled, but never healed. And yet every morning I got up and tried again, because that's what you do when you don't have the luxury of giving up. People sometimes say service workers should just find better jobs. They don't understand that quitting isn't easy when quitting means losing health insurance or going hungry. They don't understand that sometimes choices aren't choices at all. But even with everything weighing me down, there were tiny things that kept me going. The way Mom would smile when I brought her favorite soup. The small joy of sitting in my car after a long shift with cold air on my face. The satisfaction of knowing I treated someone kindly even if they didn't return it. I didn't have much, but I had that. And until the night I was fired, I thought that kindness, quiet, consistent, was enough to keep me afloat. I thought if I just kept my head down, did my job stayed polite, the world would eventually notice. But the truth is, the world doesn't always reward the people who try hard. Sometimes it punishes them. The night Tom fired me wasn't the first unfair thing that had ever happened to me, but it was the one that broke something inside me. Maybe it was because he did it in front of customers. Maybe it was because I had stayed late so many nights helping him with tasks other managers ignored. Maybe it was because I knew he already hated me for refusing to laugh at his jokes or flirt with regulars. Maybe it was simply because I was too tired to pretend I was fine anymore. As I walked into that storm, the freezing rain soaking my clothes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not fear, just emptiness. A quiet, hollow place where hope should have been. I didn't know then that life was already shifting, already bending in a direction I could not yet see. I didn't know that the man I served soup to the one everyone dismissed as worthless was about to change everything. But in that moment, all I knew was the collapse had begun long before I lost my job. I just hadn't realized I was standing in the ruins. It is strange how quickly a life can come undone, how everything you have held together with tired hands can fall apart in a single night. When I walked out of Whitmore Grill that rainy evening, I didn't yet know I had stepped into the darkest chapter of my life. I only knew my clothes were soaked, my hair stuck to my face, and the echo of Tom's voice still rang in my ears like a slap I couldn't unhear. "You're done here, Emma. Turn in your apron." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said it. Loud, dismissive, in front of customers who paused mid-bite to watch me crumble as if my humiliation were part of their entertainment. Beth smirked. Jason looked away. The old man tried to get up, maybe to help or defend me. I'll never know. But Tom blocked him, practically barking. "Sir, stay out of this. We don't need your kind causing trouble." The cruelty of that sentence clung to me more tightly than the rain outside. I stepped into the storm, the door shutting behind me like the final click of a coffin lid. I remember standing still for a moment in the parking lot, the neon sign flickering above me, the hum of the kitchen fans echoing through the walls. I remember feeling numb, as if my body were floating weightless, directionless, while the world around me kept spinning. My phone buzzed. I thought for a second it might be an apology, maybe even a reconsideration, but it was a message from the hospital my mother had taken a turn for the worse. They needed me there, immediately. I stared at the message as the rain turned heavier, bouncing off the cracked pavement. My first instinct was to get in my car. My second instinct was to check my wallet. Gas money almost nothing. Last week's paycheck was still pending because corporate was updating the system. I slid into my car anyway, shivering rain-soaked, pressing the ignition with shaking fingers. The engine sputtered, then died. I tried again. Another sputter. A cough. Silence. My breath broke into a small, strangled laugh. It sounded hysterical in the empty car. The universe wasn't subtle that night. I was being stripped down to nothing, piece by painful piece. I grabbed my bag, ran through the rain to the convenience store nearby, and took out my debit card to pay for a cheap gas can and a few dollars of fuel. The card declined. I tried again. Declined. Again. Declined. The teenage cashier shifted uncomfortably, as if wanting to tell me he was sorry, but terrified of looking weak. Behind me, a man in a business suit sighed dramatically and muttered, "Unbelievable. People shouldn't shop if they can't afford basic things." I felt my throat close up, heat rising behind my eyes, but I swallowed it down. I forced myself to apologize to the cashier for holding up the line and left the store empty-handed. Back in the car, I buried my face in my hands, trying to quiet my breathing. The rain drummed against the roof in a relentless rhythm, like someone knocking from above asking, "How much more can you take?" The world felt impossibly small. Just me, the storm, and the crushing realization that I had nothing left to stand on. Then my phone buzzed again. It was my sister. I almost didn't answer. I didn't want to burden her, but I picked up. Her voice was frantic. "Emma, Mom's asking for you. Please hurry. I told her I was on my way." I didn't tell her how impossible that was. Once the call ended, I leaned back against the seat, raindrops dripping from my hair onto the upholstery. The cold made my bones ache. It was then through the blurry windshield that I noticed him, the old man from the restaurant, standing under the awning across the parking lot watching me with an expression that was not pity, but concern. Real concern, the kind strangers rarely show. He took one slow step forward, as if deciding whether to approach, but a gust of wind made him stop. He looked fragile in the storm, like the rain might sweep him away. For a moment, I wondered if he had followed me. Then I wondered why I cared. He lifted a hand hesitating, and I thought he might walk over to check on me. But Tom's earlier words replayed in my mind, sharp and humiliating. "We don't need your kind causing trouble." That sentence had been aimed at him, and yet somehow I felt like I was the one who didn't belong anywhere. I looked away, unable to handle even a shred of kindness, because kindness in a night like that could break me more easily than cruelty. When I looked up again, he was gone, vanished into the sheets of rain, as if swallowed by the night. My breath steadied, then broke again. I wiped my face, not sure which drops were rain and which were tears. I forced myself out of the car, slammed the door harder than I meant to, and started walking. No umbrella, no jacket, just me and a storm that felt almost personal. The hospital was miles away, but I didn't have a choice. I stepped onto the sidewalk feet, already soaked through my thin shoes, and whispered to myself like a prayer, "Just keep going." One step, one breath. And that was the night everything collapsed. My job, my sense of dignity, my belief that things could only get so bad. I had no idea that the man everyone overlooked, the man Tom called trash, was about to become the turning point of everything. But in that moment, all I knew was the cold, the darkness, and the unbearable heaviness of walking into the night with absolutely nothing left. I didn't know it then, but the man everyone ignored, the man Tom dismissed as trash, the man who stood quietly in the storm watching me struggle, he was carrying a truth that would shake the very ground under my life. But on the night I lost everything he looked like, nothing more than a tired old stranger trying to stay warm. I walked for almost an hour through the rain before reaching the hospital. My clothes were soaked through, and every step felt heavier than the last. When I finally reached the front desk, the fluorescent lights were too bright, the antiseptic smell stinging my nose. Mom was stable but weak. I sat by her bedside until my eyes burned with exhaustion. Sometime after 4 a.m., the nurse urged me to go home and rest. Home. That word felt foreign. My apartment was miles away, my car dead, my bank account empty, and my future a blank wall I couldn't see past. I left the hospital and found myself wandering through the nearly empty parking lot toward the only place I could think to go, the 24-hour Walmart on the edge of town. It wasn't safe or warm or comfortable, but it was open, and that was enough. I found an empty corner in the back lot near the loading dock, hugged my knees to my chest, and tried to shield myself from the wind. I told myself I just needed to close my eyes for a few minutes, just enough to stop shaking. But every time I drifted, Tom's voice echoed inside me, mixed with the humiliation of customers staring as I was fired. The storm felt endless, the loneliness even worse. I don't know how long I sat there before I noticed a car pull into the lot. The headlights swept across the pavement, cutting through the rain like white knives. The car moved slowly, almost searching. I stiffened, shrinking into the shadows, hoping whoever it was wouldn't notice me. But the engine stopped nearby. A door opened, then footsteps. Slow, uneven, careful. I held my breath. A moment later, a familiar voice broke through the rain. "Miss Clark." My stomach tightened. I looked up, and there he was, the old man from the restaurant. His jacket was still damp from earlier, and his cap was pulled low against the wind. He shouldn't have known my name. I should have been alarmed, but something in his eyes, steady, gentle, tired, kept me from panicking. I wiped my face quickly, trying to hide the tears. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cracking. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, holding a small paper bag in his hands. "You forgot your change," he said softly. It was a lie. I knew it. He knew it. But it was the kindest lie anyone had ever told me. He extended the bag toward me, and inside I saw a sandwich, a bottle of water, and 2 packs of crackers. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. But to someone who hadn't eaten since her shift started, it looked like a feast. "I didn't come to bother you," he added, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right." I stared at him stunned, unable to form words. No one had checked on me in months, certainly not a stranger. Tears blurred my vision again, and I hated that I couldn't control them. "I'm fine," I lied. "I just needed a place to wait until morning." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something so simple it nearly shattered me. No one should be punished for offering kindness. Something inside me cracked open. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the humiliation. Maybe it was the way he said it, like a quiet truth he had carried for years. But suddenly, I felt seen. Really seen for the first time in a very long time. I swallowed hard, trying to pull myself together. "Thank you," I whispered. "For the food. And for this." He nodded once. "My name is Arthur," he said. "Arthur Hayes." I introduced myself, though he already knew my name somehow. He glanced at the parking lot, the empty asphalt glistening under the streetlights. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" I stiffened. "Yes," I lied again. He didn't call me on it. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "This fell out of your apron earlier," he said, handing it to me. Confused, I took it. It wasn't mine. Not my handwriting, not my style. It was an old pay stub dated 1998 from a restaurant called Riverstone Diner. The name on it stopped me cold. "Arthur Hayes, position head chef." My eyes darted to him. This is yours." He nodded. "I guess so." Why was it in my apron? He exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much truth he was ready to reveal. Maybe he said, because some things get lost and some things find their way back when they're needed. I opened my mouth to ask more, but he took a step back, lifting a hand in a gentle farewell. "You need rest, Miss Clark. More than you need questions tonight." Then he turned and walked back to his car. The taillights glowed red through the rain as he drove away, growing smaller and smaller until they finally disappeared into the dark. I sat there, clutching the old pay stub, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't helpless. He wasn't who he appeared to be. And somehow, for reasons I didn't yet understand, he had come looking for me. That night in the corner of a Walmart parking lot, soaked to the skin and shivering, I whispered to myself, "Who are you?" "Arthur Hayes." I had no idea the answer would turn my entire world upside down. I barely slept that night. I sat curled inside my tiny studio apartment, the one-bedroom box with peeling paint and a heater that rattled louder than it warmed. My wet clothes hung over the shower rod, dripping into the tub. I wrapped myself in an old blanket and stared at the pay stub Arthur had given me, turning it over and over in my hands, trying to make sense of it. It was yellowed at the edges, the kind of paper that had been folded so many times it was soft like cloth. The date read August 17th, 1998, more than 2 decades ago. Position head chef, weekly hours, 72. Net pay, barely enough to survive, even back then. On the back, written in small faded penmanship, were 5 words. Quality starts with dignity. A. I traced the letters, slowly feeling something unfamiliar rise in my chest. That handwriting wasn't shaky like a man who'd lived on the streets. It wasn't rushed or sloppy. It was deliberate, practiced. Someone who'd led, someone who'd taught others, someone who cared. I pulled my knees to my chest and whispered to the empty room. "Who were you?" The next morning, with a splitting headache and clothes still damp around the edges, I poured myself coffee that tasted bitter no matter how much sugar I shoveled into it. I couldn't stop thinking about Arthur showing up at Walmart, scanning that massive lot until he found me. How did he even get my name? Why did he care? Why was he carrying a pay stub from the 90s, and why did it end up in my apron? My phone buzzed with hospital updates then, with bills, then with messages from my credit card company reminding me again that my payment was past due. Reality came crashing back hard. I knew I couldn't afford to sit and wonder about mysterious old men and forgotten pay stubs. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside the morning air, cold enough to sting my lungs. My only plan was to return to Whitmore Grill to ask Tom for my last paycheck. I needed money for Mom's medication. I needed bus fare. I needed something, anything, to get me through the next week. When I reached the restaurant, my breath caught. Through the window, I saw the same group who mocked me last night laughing as if nothing had happened. Beth was stirring sugar into her coffee like she didn't spend the night calling me Mother Teresa. Jason was telling a story with his feet propped up on a chair. And Tom laughed the loudest. My stomach twisted. I turned away from the window and couldn't bring myself to go inside. Instead, I walked to the side alley and leaned against the cold brick wall, the pay stub still clutched in my hand. I unfolded it again, staring at the note. Quality starts with dignity. How many years would someone keep a scrap of paper with a message like that? Why would he give it to me, or was it an accident? I slid my hand into the paper bag Arthur had given me the previous night, hoping for some clue. All that remained were crumbs from the sandwich and a napkin, but when I lifted the napkin, my breath caught. A second piece of paper was underneath one that definitely hadn't been there when he handed me the bag. It was a faded newsletter clipping from Riverstone Diner's grand opening in 1999. A photo of a young chef stood in the center wearing a crisp white coat and a proud smile. The caption read, "Head Chef Arthur Hayes leads staff through first full service." My heart thudded hard and fast. Arthur wasn't just a former chef. He had led kitchens. He had trained teams. He had built something. And now he was wandering into my cheap diner alone, ignored and dismissed like garbage. Something about it made my eyes burn again, anger mixed with mourning, though I didn't know what for. I tucked the clipping back into the bag, folding it carefully. All at once, I remembered the look on his face when Tom yelled at me, that flicker of pain, like he'd seen that scene before. Maybe he had. Maybe he'd lived it. I started walking the clipping and pay stub tucked safely inside my coat. My feet led me toward downtown without meaning to. I found myself in front of an old abandoned building with boarded windows and a faded sign that once read Riverstone Diner. The place was dead, but something about it felt familiar only because I'd stared at the name all night. I pressed my palm against the wooden door, feeling splinters catch on my skin. A gust of cold air swept past me, and for a moment it felt like the ghost of the life Arthur once had brushed my shoulder. I didn't understand why it mattered so much, why I cared, why these scraps of his past felt heavier than they should. But they did. I whispered into the still morning air, "What happened to you?" When I turned to leave, something slid from my coat pocket and fluttered to the sidewalk, the pay stub. I bent to pick it up, brushing off the dirt. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Under the printed text, barely visible unless angled toward the light, was an embossed restaurant logo. The same logo carved into the boarded door beside me, Riverstone's crest. This pay stub had come from here, but Arthur hadn't stepped foot near the diner last night. It meant he'd carried this scrap of his history with him through the years, through whatever life had done to him, through every fall and climb. People don't keep reminders of pain unless it's tied to something they can't let go of. Maybe guilt, maybe grief, maybe a promise. I kicked a loose pebble, the small click echoing up the block. My thoughts circled faster. Why give this to me? Why show up last night? Why seek me out? Why tell me no one should be punished for kindness unless he'd been punished once too? Unless he'd been exactly where I was. Small, humiliated, disregarded. I pressed the pay stub to my chest, a strange comfort blooming inside me. I whispered, "Thank you." It felt silly, but right. Then, for reasons I still can't explain, I tucked the pay stub into my wallet like a lucky charm and whispered to myself, "I'll return this to him. Whatever this is, I need to know." I didn't know it then, but that single piece of paper would pull me straight into the truth. Arthur spent years hiding truth that would reshape both our lives in ways I never could have imagined. I didn't plan on seeing him again so soon, and honestly, part of me hoped I wouldn't. I wasn't ready for more questions, more reminders of the humiliation replaying in my mind like a broken film reel. But life has a way of circling back to people you're meant to meet even when you don't feel ready. 2 days after I found the pay stub and the diner clipping, I walked into a tiny coffee shop on 5th Street, the kind of place with scratched wooden tables and the smell of cinnamon soaked into the walls. I only needed Wi-Fi to check hospital updates and maybe search for new job listings. But the moment I stepped inside, my breath caught in my throat. He was there, Arthur Hayes, sitting alone by the window with a steaming cup of tea, his coat hung neatly over the back of the chair. He looked nothing like the frail old man in the rain that night. His shoulders were straighter, his eyes clearer. In the daylight, he looked almost dignified. My heart slammed against my ribs, a mix of fear, anger, and something like betrayal. He noticed me instantly. His eyebrows lifted and he stood slowly, as if unsure I'd walk toward him or walk straight out again. "Emma," he said softly, like my name was something fragile. "I was hoping I'd see you." I swallowed hard, blood hot in my face. "Did you follow me?" He shook his head. "No. I come here every morning." I didn't know whether to believe that. I didn't know whether to believe anything about this man. Still, I walked toward him because something inside me needed answers. I sat across from him, stiff-guarded. "Why are you here, Arthur?" He took a slow breath and folded his hands the way someone does when they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Because I owe you the truth, at least some of it." I pulled the pay stub and diner clipping from my coat pocket and laid them on the table. His eyes flickered in recognition, surprise, and then something deeper. "Sadness. You left these," I said. "Or you gave them to me. I don't know which because nothing about this makes sense." He leaned back, staring at the papers like they were ghosts from a life he hadn't expected to see again. "I didn't mean for you to find those," he murmured. "I wasn't ready. Ready for what I pressed. For someone to know who I used to be." The way he said used to crush something inside me. I felt irritation spike. "So, what exactly were you doing at Whitmore Grill, inspecting people like some sort of test? Did you come there looking for someone to judge?" His face fell instantly. "No, that's not." "Then why did you show up like that?" My voice cracked, embarrassing me. "Why did I lose my job because I served you soup?" He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. "I didn't know they'd fire you, but I needed to see the truth. Places look different when the staff thinks no one important is watching." The words hit hard, too hard. They knocked the wind out of me, and suddenly I wasn't angry. I was hurt. "So I was part of some kind of experiment," I whispered. "You watched them humiliate me. You watched them talk to you like you were worthless. And you just let it happen." Shame washed across his face like a slow, breaking wave. If I had interfered too early, I wouldn't have seen what I needed to see. "And I am sorry. More than you know." I stared at him, fury and heartbreak swirling like a storm in my chest. "You should have stopped it." "You are right," he said quietly. "I should have. I underestimated the cruelty people are capable of when they think no one is watching. And I underestimated how much it would hurt to see it again." "Again," I echoed. He nodded, eyes distant. "I once lost everything because I trusted the wrong people to lead. I swore I'd never let it happen again. But I needed to be sure. I needed to see the real culture of that place." I looked down at the old photo of him as head chef. Strong, steady. The image didn't match the man in front of me. Shoulders slumped and voice trembling. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why did you come after me? Why care what happened to me at all?" His voice softened to a near whisper. "Because you were the only one who treated me like a person. No hesitation, no calculation. Just humanity. Do you know how rare that is?" Tears stung my eyes, and I blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. "That's not special. It's basic decency." He shook his head. "Basic decency is the rarest thing of all." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The coffee machine hissed behind the counter. A couple laughed softly at a table near the door. Life continued, unaware of how everything between us had cracked open. I drew in a shaky breath. "I still don't trust you." He nodded. "You shouldn't. Not yet." That honesty disarmed me in a way I didn't expect. "So what now?" I asked. Arthur reached into his coat pocket and slid a small envelope across the table. Not thick, not heavy, just enough to matter. Inside is my card, he said, and a note. If you choose to walk away and never speak to me again, I'll understand. But if you want answers, real answers, I'd like you to meet me tomorrow morning. Same place, same time. I stared at the envelope but didn't reach for it. My voice came out small. Why? He held my gaze, eyes steady and sincere. Because you deserve the truth, and because I think you're the only person who can understand it. I swallowed the tight knot in my throat. And if I don't come... His expression softened with a kind of sadness I couldn't name. Then I'll hope the world is kinder to you than it's been to me. He stood, slowly placed a few dollars under his cup, and walked toward the door. The bell chimed softly as he stepped outside. I sat frozen, staring at the envelope torn between fear and curiosity, between anger and something dangerously close to empathy. By the time I finally reached for the envelope, my hands were trembling. And deep down, I already knew I would be there tomorrow. Because whatever truth Arthur Hayes carried, it had already begun to change my life. I barely slept that night, turning over every word Arthur had said, replaying it until my mind felt bruised. By morning, I was still torn between wanting answers and wanting distance, but something deeper pulled me back to that coffee shop. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I needed to know why a man who looked half broken seemed to see something in me I didn't see in myself. When I walked in, he was already there, same table, same posture, hands clasped in front of him like he'd been rehearsing what to say. He stood when he saw me, relief washing over his face so clearly it almost startled me. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. I didn't sit right away. I needed to reclaim some ground. "I'm here to listen." I said, not to forgive. He nodded as if he expected nothing less. "That's fair." I finally sat the wooden chair creaking under me and folded my arms. "All right, Arthur. You said you owed me the truth. Start talking." He leaned back, pulling in a long breath. "I used to run an award-winning restaurant group, 15 locations across Ohio. We were known for treating people well, feeding everyone with dignity, not just the ones with money." I blinked, surprised. I knew his name sounded familiar, but I'd never connected it. "Then my wife got sick," he continued, voice thinning. "She was the heart of my business. When she passed, the company changed hands too fast, too carelessly. The culture fell apart. The places we built became something else, something cold." His eyes dimmed. I lost more than a person. I lost the meaning behind everything we'd created. I felt my throat tighten despite myself. "Why not take it back?" He gave a dry, almost sad laugh. "It's not that simple when grief poisons your judgment, and when people you trusted decide you're not useful anymore." My heart dipped. It sounded too close to my own story, just older and more weathered. "I started visiting the restaurants quietly," he said, observing, watching how people behaved when they didn't think the owner was there. My eyes narrowed. "So that's what you were doing at Whitmore Grill?" "Yes," he admitted, "and I expected disappointment. What I didn't expect was you." My stomach flipped uncomfortably. "I didn't do anything special. You didn't treat me like I was trash," he said. "You didn't scan my clothes and decide my worth, and you didn't talk to me like your manager and coworkers did." Shame burned through me at the memory. I should have said more. I should have fought back. "No," Arthur said gently. "You did exactly what you needed to. You chose kindness, and that revealed everything I needed to know." I leaned forward, hands trembling slightly. "So what now? You going to file complaints? Fire people, expose them." He shook his head. "I'm tired of tearing things down, Emma. I want to rebuild." I stared at him, unsure where this was going. "What does that have to do with me?" Arthur reached into his coat pocket again, but this time he didn't pull out an envelope or a card. He pulled out a notebook, worn, creased, covered in handwriting so small it almost blurred together. He slid it toward me. "This is what I've been working on, trying to rebuild my entire restaurant philosophy. A dignity-first model, a system where service isn't based on how much you think someone might tip." My breath hitched. "Arthur, I need help," he said simply. "I need someone with eyes like yours. Someone who sees people instead of categories. Someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. He paused. Someone honest. The word hit me like a quiet blow. Honest. Something no one at Whitmore Grill had ever bothered to see in me. "Why me?" I whispered. "You barely know me." "Because I watched how you worked when no one important was looking," he said. "And that is the truest version of a person." My pulse pounded. "What exactly are you asking?" He sipped his tea, calm again. "Spend 1 week with me. Visit the restaurants in my chain. Observe. Give feedback. Show me what needs fixing." I blinked, stunned. "Arthur? That sounds like a job." "It is," he said, "a temporary one. Paid, no strings attached. You're free to walk away after a week." I shook my head slowly. "I don't know anything about running restaurants. Don't say just a waitress." His tone sharpened. "You're not? You have instincts managers spend years trying to learn." My throat closed. No one had ever said anything like that to me. But what if I mess it up? What if I make things worse? "Then we learn," he said calmly. "But if you don't try, nothing changes at all." Silence stretched between us. Heavy, electric. I thought about the hospital bills, the eviction warning taped to my mailbox, the way Tom looked at me like I was disposable, the way Arthur looked at me like I mattered. Why a week, I finally asked. Because he said with a faint smile that's long enough to see a person's heart. I exhaled shakily. "And if I walk away now?" "Then I wish you well," he said. "And I'll keep searching for someone else. But I won't find another you." The sincerity in his voice cracked something open inside me. Fear, hope, possibility, all tangled together. I looked down at the notebook, at the worn edges touched by grief and determination. When I finally lifted my eyes, Arthur looked almost afraid of my answer. 1 week, I said quietly. "That's all I can promise." Relief washed over his face like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. 1 week, he repeated. "It's enough." And for the first time since losing my job, something inside me shifted. Maybe small, maybe fragile, but real. A chance, a beginning, an opportunity I never expected. And as I closed the notebook and held it to my chest, I realized something else. This was the moment everything would start to change. I did not know what to expect when I agreed to spend a week with Arthur, but the very next evening he picked me up in an old station wagon that looked like it had lived as many lives as he had. The seats were cracked, the radio barely worked, and there was a faint smell of coffee and lemon polish lingering inside, like it had once belonged to someone who cared about keeping things clean, no matter how old they got. He drove without much talking hands, resting easy on the wheel, headlights cutting through the night as we left the city center and drifted toward the first restaurant in his chain. The place sat on a dimly lit corner neon sign flickering like it was giving up on being noticed. We parked across the street watching from the shadowed interior of the car as customers came and went. "What am I looking for?" I asked finally. Everything he said, how they greet people, how they decide who matters, how they hide their mistakes. Just watch. So we watched. A young couple walked in first, awkwardly dressed maybe for a budget date. The hostess barely glanced at them and pointed toward the back like they were an inconvenience. 15 minutes later, a man in a suit stepped in and she practically sprinted to seat him at the window. I felt the familiar sting in my chest, that I murmured that right there is exactly what destroys a place. Arthur nodded silently. More customers came. Some ignored. Some welcomed. Some judged before they even sat down. Every tiny gesture spoke volumes. After an hour, Arthur finally asked, "If you were running this place tonight, what would you fix first?" I hesitated. "Tone," I said. "The invisible rules, the unspoken hierarchy, the belief that money equals respect." He looked at me, a slow smile appearing like a sunrise. "Good. What else?" So I began listing things. Small things. Real things. The exact details only a server notices, where staff hid napkins to avoid responsibilities, how they swapped tables behind the manager's back, how they tuned themselves to tip potential instead of human dignity. I thought he'd take notes, but he didn't. He just listened, nodding with that quiet intensity people have when they finally hear something they've waited years to understand. "All right," he said when the last customer left. "Let's see the next one." So, we drove. For 6 nights, we visited 6 restaurants, each one with its own flaws. One ignored elderly customers, another rolled eyes at non-English speakers, one treated service staff like disposable tools. Another let experienced older servers handle the worst shifts while teenagers got the best tips. At each place, Arthur asked the same question: "What would you change?" And every night, somehow, I found more answers. Things I didn't even know I had in me. I wasn't just pointing out problems, I was designing systems. A layout where no server could claim high-paying sections. A fair rotation chart. A training protocol teaching staff to approach every guest within 30 seconds. Mirrors angled so workers could make eye contact with incoming customers. A kindness-first service model, step by step. The more I spoke, the more Arthur watched me with this strange, humbled admiration. "You've been carrying these ideas for a long time," he said once. I didn't know they were ideas I admitted. I thought they were just thoughts I'd never get to use. "Thoughts," he said softly, "are seeds. You just needed somewhere to plant them." The words stunned me. No one had ever spoken to me like that. No one had ever treated my mind like something valuable. On the 5th night, something happened that changed everything. We were in the parking lot behind a location near Dayton, watching a hostess turn away an older woman who walked with difficulty and looked embarrassed even existing. I reached for the door handle, anger rising in my chest. "Emma," Arthur said quickly, catching my arm. "Not yet. They can't just—" "I know," he said, "but if you step in now, they'll shut down. They won't reveal who they are when they feel watched." "But she's embarrassed," I said, voice shaking. "She deserves better." He looked at me with a softness that quieted my anger. "You're right, and that's why I need you." Later, when we finally left, Arthur pulled into an empty park lot overlooking the river. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered gold. He turned off the engine. "Tell me something," he said. "Why do you care so much?" I stared at the glowing skyline. "Because I've been that person," I whispered. The one ignored, judged, dismissed. "I know how small it makes you feel, how it eats at your spirit. If I can stop someone else from feeling that, I want to." Arthur looked at me with something like pride. "That," he said, "is leadership." My breath caught. "Leadership, me. Yes. You lead by example, without trying." His words settled into me like warm light. That night, driving home, I felt something shift. Not in the world, in me. On the final night of our shadow tour, we visited the oldest location in his chain. The place was loud, chaotic, filled with staff who didn't care, and management too tired to fight it. A server dropped a tray and laughed it off. A teenage hostess smirked at an older man's clothes. A cook yelled insults loud enough for customers to hear. I watched it all, sadness pressing on my ribs. "Can this even be fixed?" I asked quietly. "It can," Arthur said, "but not by me. Not anymore." I turned to him, startled. "Then, by who?" He met my eyes, unwavering. "You." My breath tangled. I felt exposed, unready, unqualified, but also seen. "Arthur, I'm just learning, and you're learning faster than anyone I've trained in 20 years. I shook my head, overwhelmed. "I don't know if I can do this." "Try," he said. "That's all I ask. Try." As we drove back toward Columbus, the city lights fading behind us, I held his notebook in my lap. The edges were worn, the pages filled with dreams someone thought they'd never finish. But now, somehow they were mine too. Working in the shadows with Arthur hadn't just opened my eyes, it had opened my future. And though I was terrified of what came next, for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't walking toward it alone. I woke up the next morning with a tight knot in my stomach, the kind you get before an exam or a doctor's appointment, or any moment that has the power to change everything. Arthur texted me early. "Tonight is yours," the message read. "Be ready by 6. I stared at the words for a long time, heart pounding. Mine. He was giving me a restaurant for one night. Not to work in, to run. Me, the woman who had been fired less than 2 weeks ago, who cried in parking lots, who counted every dollar like it might evaporate. I spent the day pacing my apartment, replaying the past 6 nights in my head. Every rude hostess, every ignored customer, every moment someone decided who mattered and who didn't. By the time 6 o'clock came and Arthur's station wagon pulled up, I had convinced myself of 2 things: one, that I would absolutely fail, and 2, that I had no choice but to try. We drove to a restaurant 20 minutes outside Columbus, one I had never visited before. It wasn't fancy, but it had potential. Wide windows, a warm brick exterior, and the smell of garlic and rosemary drifting out from the kitchen vents. When we walked in through the back entrance, Arthur didn't give a speech or a pep talk. He simply placed his hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Tonight they follow you." Then he stepped aside. My pulse hammered in my ears. 3 servers stood at the prep station, a hostess at the front, 2 bussers near the drink station, and a manager named Louise, who looked like she'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by much. They turned when they saw me confused. Louise frowned. "Arthur, I thought you were sending the consultant tonight." "I did," he said calmly. "She's right there." The room fell into a stunned silence. Heat flushed up my neck. I wanted to disappear. Louise blinked slowly. "Yes," Arthur said. "Emma will be running tonight's shift." The servers exchanged looks. One of them laughed under his breath. Another whispered something about babysitting amateurs. I inhaled deeply and stepped forward. "If you'll gather for 3 minutes," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "I'll explain how tonight is going to work." Louise lifted her chin, testing me. "This is a busy Friday, not a training session." "I know," I said. "That's why we're starting now." Something in my tone made her pause. Slowly, reluctantly, the team formed a circle. My heart thudded painfully as every pair of eyes settled on me. "Here's the deal," I said. "Tonight we do things differently. No picking and choosing based on tips. No ignoring customers because they look tired or messy or old. No seating people in dead corners because you think they won't order enough." A server named Ryan crossed his arms. "And why would we do that?" "Because," I said, meeting his eyes, "your job isn't to judge people. Your job is to serve them." He scoffed. "Yeah? And who exactly put you in charge?" "I did," Arthur said from the doorway, his voice low and firm. "Carry on, Emma." A hush fell over the room. For a moment, I saw something shift in their faces. Respect, curiosity, uncertainty, maybe all 3, I continued. "There will be a new rotation chart tonight. Everyone gets equal tables, everyone gets equal chances, and everyone greets their guests within 30 seconds. No exceptions." Louise frowned. "That's impossible during rush." "It isn't," I said. "It's discipline." The words came out sharper than I intended, but they landed. Something in the room tightened, a challenge accepted, a spark. We opened doors at 7. Within minutes, the restaurant filled. The hostess started to falter, overwhelmed by the crowd. I stepped in beside her, showing her how to make eye contact, how to greet guests with warmth instead of robotic politeness. She relaxed. The line stabilized. Then the real test began. A group of construction workers arrived, still wearing dusty boots. Ryan hesitated, hovering near the tablet stand, waiting for someone else to take them. I walked straight to him. "Table 3, I said quietly. "Treat them like VIP. They're not VIP, he muttered. "Everyone is tonight," I replied. He rolled his eyes but walked over. I watched from across the room as he greeted them stiffly at first, then loosened as they joked with him, laughing like they'd known each other for years. 10 minutes later, he came back, cheeks slightly flushed. "They're actually pretty cool," he said. "People usually are," I replied. The night unfolded in waves. At one point, an elderly couple walked in slowly. The hostess looked overwhelmed again. I saw panic in her eyes. I stepped behind her, whispering, "Breathe. Walk them to table 4. Offer them the booth with extra padding." She did. They smiled warmly. Later, a mother with 3 kids spilled soda across the table. Instead of scolding her or avoiding the mess, one of the bussers rushed over with towels and a gentle, "You're fine. Happens all the time." I caught Arthur watching from the corner, hands folded, eyes shining with something like quiet pride. But the true turning point came around 9:30. A businessman in an expensive coat entered. He snapped his fingers at the hostess demanding the window seat. I watched the servers tense instinctively, trying to cater to him first. Old habits rising. I stepped forward. "Sir, we'll seat you in the order you arrived." He scoffed loudly. "Do you know who I am?" My voice stayed calm. "A customer, and you'll be treated exactly like everyone else." The room seemed to hold its breath. The businessman glared, but after a tense moment, he sighed dramatically and sat where he was told. When I walked past his table later, I found him smiling faintly at the menu. "You run a tight ship," he said. "It's refreshing." "Just trying something new," I replied. "Don't lose it," he murmured. "Restaurants forget the simple stuff." By 11, as the last tables finished their meals, something astonishing happened. The team worked together. No tension, no arguments, no whispered complaints, no favoritism. Just flow, just service, just dignity. And when the final guest left, the entire room felt lighter. Louise approached me first. "I didn't think this would work," she admitted. "Neither did I said softly. But it did. Ryan walked over next, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was wrong," he said. "About you. About the customers. About everything." "You weren't wrong," I said. "You were just taught the wrong way." Arthur stepped forward at last, eyes warm with something deeper than approval. "Emma," he said quietly, "look around." I did. The staff stood together, calm, tired, strangely hopeful. The room felt different, alive, almost reborn. "This," Arthur said, "is what leadership looks like." And standing there in the soft hum of a quiet restaurant, finally at peace, I felt a truth bloom in my chest, fragile, unbelievable, but real. I had done this. Me, not the fired waitress, not the invisible woman, but the one guiding the room. For the first time in my life, I felt capable, strong, seen. And as I locked eyes with Arthur across the dim light, another realization landed with quiet certainty. This was only the beginning. The next morning, Arthur picked me up without a word of explanation, only a brief "wear something comfortable" before hanging up. My nerves buzzed the entire drive. Last night, I'd run a full restaurant shift on my own. Today, I had no idea what waited for me. We drove through downtown Columbus past brick storefronts and old theaters until the familiar shape of Whitmore Grill appeared ahead. My chest tightened instantly. The building stood like a memory I wasn't ready to face. The windows I had cleaned 1,000 times. The booth where families laughed. The counter where Tom told me I was a waste of payroll. My breath came faster. "Arthur, why are we here?" He didn't answer at first. He parked in the back lot and turned off the engine. "Because it's time," he said gently. "Time for what?" My voice cracked. "For the truth to come out." He stepped out before I could respond. I followed my legs, shaky, my palms sweating. As we approached the side entrance, I saw staff through the windows. Beth leaned against the counter laughing with Jason. Tom stood near the register with a clipboard barking instructions the way he always did. I felt a strange mix of nausea and déjà vu. This place was a wound, a bruise that never fully faded. Arthur held the door for me. The moment we stepped inside, heads turned. Conversations died. Beth frowned. Jason blinked in surprise. But Tom's expression twisted instantly, like he'd bitten into a lemon. "What is she doing here?" he snapped. "Sir, you can't just bring people in through the employee entrance." Arthur didn't flinch. "Good morning, Tom." Tom squared his shoulders. "This woman is banned from this property." He pointed at me. "She caused disruptions. She violated conduct standards." "Stop," Arthur said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the space like a blade. Tom blinked at him. "Excuse me?" Arthur stepped forward. "You don't speak to her that way." "And who exactly are you?" Tom spat. A customer, a friend of hers. This is a place of business. If you don't leave, I'll call security. I felt heat rush to my face. Humiliation crawled up my throat, but Arthur stayed calm. Too calm. He tilted his head. You should be careful how you speak. You don't know who you're talking to. Tom scoffed. I don't care who you are. Arthur nodded slowly as if giving him one final chance. Very well. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small key card, black, embossed in gold. He slid it onto the counter with 2 fingers. Everyone leaned slightly forward. I held my breath. That, Arthur said quietly, unlocks the financial office, and the building security room, and the safe. Silence slammed into the room. Beth's jaw dropped. Jason's eyes widened. Tom's face went sheet white. No, Tom whispered. No, that's not possible. Arthur looked straight into his eyes. I own Whitmore Grill. The words fell heavy, final, impossible to ignore. I felt my knees weaken. Beth gasped. Jason straightened abruptly. But Tom's mouth opened and closed like a punctured balloon. You're the owner. Arthur nodded. Yes. And last week, you fired the only person in this place who remembered what hospitality is. Tom stuttered. It was a justified termination. She broke procedure. She served a man with dignity. Arthur interrupted. The same dignity you stripped from this restaurant. Tom's face flushed red. Sir, if I had known who you were. And that, Arthur said, is exactly the problem. I stood frozen, stunned, confused. The room felt tilted like the world had shifted an inch to the left. Then Arthur turned toward the staff. Everyone gather, he said. The authority in his voice made even Beth straighten. Employees trickled over, some nervous, some curious, some pretending not to stare at me. I kept my eyes on the floor. Effective immediately, Arthur said there will be changes. Tom swallowed hard. Sir, I believe we can discuss this privately. No, Arthur replied. This concerns the entire staff. Beth glanced at me, guilt flickering behind her eyes. Jason shifted awkwardly. Arthur continued. Tom, your time here is over. Tom's face went pale again. You're firing me. You fired yourself, Arthur said calmly. I'm just making it official. Tom sputtered but didn't argue. Arthur had a presence no one wanted to challenge. 2 bussers stepped aside as Tom grabbed his clipboard and stormed toward the office, muttering curses under his breath. When he disappeared, the room felt lighter somehow. Arthur turned to the staff. This restaurant has lost its way. It used to stand for warmth, for respect, for dignity. Somewhere along the line that was replaced with greed and arrogance. No one spoke. But last week, Arthur said, his voice softening. Someone reminded me what this place was meant to be. My stomach flipped. He looked at me. Right at me. This is Emma Harper, he said. She will be your new manager. A shock wave moved through the room. Beth's hand flew to her mouth. Jason stared as if I'd grown wings. I could barely breathe. Arthur, wait, I whispered. I can't run a restaurant. You already did, he said, last night. My breath caught. The test run, the teamwork, the flow, the quiet, steady pride. You proved not only that you can lead, Arthur said, but that you understand people, and that matters more than any degree or title. The staff looked at me in a way they never had before, not with mockery, not with pity, with recognition, with possibility. I swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. Then say yes, Arthur replied. Say, you're ready. The room waited. My chest rose and fell. Everything that had broken me every long night, every humiliation, every moment I felt invisible led to this. I looked at the place that had crushed me, then at Arthur, who had seen me even when I didn't see myself, then at the staff who were waiting to be led. Yes, I whispered. Then, louder. Yes. I'm ready. A small cheer broke out from the back. Jason laughed under his breath. Beth wiped her eyes. Arthur smiled the soft, proud kind I'd only seen once before. And as I stepped forward, standing where Tom once stood, I felt something I had never felt in this building: belonging, power, purpose, the beginning of something bigger than redemption, a return, not to the girl who was fired, but to the woman I was meant to become. That night, after the staff had gone home and the last echoes of clattering dishes faded into silence, Arthur asked me to stay. The restaurant felt different in the quiet, softer, like the walls had finally relaxed after years of tension. I stood near the window table, the one he'd sat at on the night everything began, and watched him approach with a heaviness in his steps I had never seen before. "Emma," he said gently, "there are things I should have told you earlier." My stomach tightened. About what? He sat down at the booth, gesturing for me to join him. When I sat, he removed a thin, worn leather wallet from his coat. Inside was an old photo edges curled from time. A woman in her 40s with a warm smile and kind eyes. She wore a Whitmore Grill apron, her hair tied back loosely, flour on her cheek. She looked so alive it hurt. "This is my wife," Arthur said. Her name was Eleanor. My breath caught. Arthur nodded slowly. "She passed away 7 years ago. Car accident. Quick! Unfair!" He swallowed. "She built this restaurant from nothing. Every recipe, every rule, every bit of its heart." I looked at the photo again, the softness in the woman's eyes, the gentleness in her smile. And suddenly, the phrase on the back of the pay stub from 1998 hit me like a wave. "Quality starts with dignity." She used to say that Arthur murmured as if reading my thoughts. It was her philosophy, her compass. We grew this place together, but after she died, I couldn't bear to walk inside. It felt like an echo of everything I'd lost. He looked up at me, eyes tired, vulnerable in a way I had never seen. "So I stayed away. Let managers run it. Let the culture rot without realizing how far it had fallen." I leaned forward. "Arthur, you couldn't have known." "I should have," he said. "But grief makes cowards out of strong people." He paused before continuing. "I came back 6 months ago, quietly, dressed in old clothes, slipping in and out so no one recognized me." My chest tightened. "So you were testing them?" He nodded. "Testing everyone, looking for someone who still believed in the kind of place Eleanor wanted this to be. Someone who treated people like people, not transactions." He looked straight at me now. "Do you know how many nights I sat in that booth and watched kindness disappear? Watched employees turn cold, watched dignity leak out of this place like water from a cracked pipe." His voice broke. "Then you handed me a cup of coffee." The world seemed to stop. My breath, my pulse, everything inside me froze. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "You didn't size me up. You didn't care what I looked like. You saw a human being, the same way my wife used to." A lump rose in my throat. "Arthur," I whispered. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was just doing what felt right. He shook his head. "That's the point. Kindness is only real when it's instinctive." He looked down at the table, his fingers tracing a groove in the wood. "The night you were fired, I almost stepped in. But I didn't. Because I needed to see what would happen when cruelty went unchecked, whether anyone would stop it, whether anyone would defend you." He clenched his jaw. No one did. I felt those words hit my chest like a blow. I had suspected it, felt it, but hearing it confirmed hurt more than I expected. "I'm sorry," Arthur said softly. "I let it happen because I had to be sure. You deserved better than the pain I allowed, but I needed the truth. I didn't speak. Couldn't." My throat burned. Arthur continued. "After they fired you, I watched you walk out into the rain. You held yourself together until the door closed. Then I saw you break." The memory flooded me. The cold, the humiliation, the trembling hands on my steering wheel, and that Arthur whispered was the moment I knew. You were the person Eleanor would have chosen, not just to save this restaurant, but to carry her belief forward. My tears spilled silently. He slid the old pay stub across the table. "This belonged to her," he said. She gave it to me on our wedding day. A reminder that the world doesn't need brilliance as much as it needs decency. I stared at the faded ink, the handwritten note, the echo of a woman I had never met but somehow felt like I knew. I thought I'd lost the last piece of her, Arthur said. Until you returned it. I blinked in confusion. I didn't. Not the paper, he said. The message. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. Emma, you revived something in this place that I thought had died with her. I pressed my hand to my chest. My heart felt too full, too heavy, too unreal. There's one more thing you need to know, Arthur said gently. Eleanor and I always planned to pass Whitmore Grill to someone who lived by the values she built it on. His eyes softened. I believe that person is you. My vision blurred. Heat rushed through my face. Arthur, I'm no one special. He gave a small smile. That's exactly why you are. The lights hummed softly above us. The world outside was quiet. And I realized that in one impossible, breathtaking moment, everything I thought I knew about myself, my work, my worth, had shifted. The truth wasn't just a twist. It was a calling. And it had been waiting for me long before I ever served a cup of coffee to a stranger in the rain. 1 year later, on an early autumn evening, when the air felt soft and cool, and the restaurant windows glowed like lanterns against the fading sky, I stood out on the sidewalk staring at the place that had once been the scene of my deepest humiliation and was now something entirely different. Whitmore Grill looked brighter, warmer alive in a way it had never been before. Golden light spilled through the windows onto the pavement, carrying the hum of laughter, clinking forks, and soft music drifting through the glass whenever the door opened. For a long moment, I simply watched, letting my breath settle, letting the weight of everything we had built sink in. When I finally stepped inside, the familiar warmth wrapped around me instantly. Beth was at the hostess stand, her posture straighter, her smile softer, and she greeted an older couple with genuine warmth. Jason was wiping down the bar, making a silly face to a toddler sitting with her parents, who giggled until she hiccuped. Noah passed by with a tray, nodding to me with the same quiet confidence he had grown into over months of steady change. None of them looked like the people who once rolled their eyes at kindness or treated struggling customers like burdens. They looked like a team, a family, and somehow, impossibly, I was the one leading them. I walked toward the kitchen, checking on a few tables along the way. At one booth, I overheard a woman saying the place felt different, like someone had breathed new life into it. Her husband nodded. This place used to feel cold, he said. Now it feels like someone cares. I paused, my heart tightening because that single line felt like the full circle I never expected. In the kitchen, the cooks were laughing over a small radio, humming along to an old song as they plated dishes with pride. The walls that once echoed with tension now hummed with an energy that felt almost sacred. When I stepped back into the dining room, Arthur was standing near the window table, the same one where everything had begun. He was dressed neatly, his hair trimmed, his shoulders relaxed in a way that had taken most of the year to settle into. He looked less like the lonely man in a frayed coat and more like a man who had finally found peace. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Emma, he said warmly. You made it. I smiled as I joined him at the booth. Wouldn't miss the anniversary of the night you ordered one bowl of soup and changed the rest of my life. He chuckled, shaking his head. I didn't change your life. You did that yourself. I hesitated before sitting. You guided me. Arthur met my eyes. No, I recognized you. That's all. The server brought us both coffee without being asked. Arthur lifted his cup in a quiet toast. To Eleanor, he said, and to you. My throat tightened. Always to her, I whispered, and always to the kindness she believed in. For a moment, we simply sat there sipping coffee, listening to the restaurant breathe around us. Then Arthur set his cup down and slid an envelope across the table, a familiar gesture. My pulse skipped. Another envelope. He smiled gently. Not exactly. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet on thick cream paper. At the top, Whitmore Hospitality Group. Below that, Partner Agreement. My breath caught. Arthur, I said, shaking my head. I already told you I don't need anything else. He leaned forward. It's not about need, it's about stewardship. This restaurant is thriving not because of a business plan, but because of a culture you rebuilt. You earned this. The words hit me with a force that felt like both a release and a beginning. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Thank you, I said softly. Truly. Arthur's eyes softened. You know, there was a time I thought I'd never see the heart of this place again. Never see my wife's dream alive. He looked around the room, taking in the warmth, the laughter, the soft glow of lights against polished wood. But tonight, I think she'd be proud. The lump in my throat returned deeper this time. After a moment, he stood. Want to take a walk? The night's nice. We stepped outside. The air smelled faintly of rain that had fallen earlier, the sidewalk still damp, reflecting the streetlight in soft amber ripples. The restaurant glowed behind us like a lighthouse. We walked slowly down the block, saying nothing at first. Silence between us was never heavy, just easy, familiar. After a few minutes, Arthur spoke. Do you ever think about that night, he asked. The night everything fell apart. I smiled faintly. Every time it rains. I remember the fear, the humiliation, the unfairness, the way I felt invisible. He nodded. And now, I said quietly, I remember that choosing kindness created everything I have, even when it cost me everything at first. Arthur looked out at the wet pavement, his breath visible in the cool air. My wife used to say that kindness is never wasted. It just takes time to come back home. His words settled around us like soft echoes. We walked until we reached the corner, then turned back toward the restaurant. When it came into view again, warm and glowing against the night, something inside me settled in a way I had never known before. Full circle. Arthur stopped near the window table and looked at me gently. Emma, he said, you didn't just rebuild a business. You restored something sacred. I felt the truth of that settle deep inside me. The lights from the restaurant reflected in the puddles at our feet. I took a slow breath. I didn't do it alone. He nodded. No one ever does. When he walked to his car, I stayed on the sidewalk for a long moment watching the light spill onto the pavement. Then I walked back to the front door, unlocked. It glanced one last time through the glass and whispered to myself softly, surely the words that had carried me through this entire journey. Kindness built this, and I stepped inside. There is something quietly powerful about nights like this one. Nights where a single moment of kindness becomes the hinge on which an entire life turns. When you step back from Emma's journey, you might realize it wasn't the restaurant, the unfairness, or even Arthur's reveal that defined the story. It was the choice she made in the first minute, not the last. A bowl of soup, a warm voice, a refusal to look away from someone who looked forgotten by the world. We live in a time where people hurry past each other, where we decide who matters in a split second, usually based on clothes money or the way someone stands at the door. But Emma reminds us that dignity does not depend on appearance, and kindness is not a transaction. It is a seed. It may land on hard soil. It may take months before you see the first green shoot, but when it grows, it changes entire landscapes. Some of you watching this might know exactly how it feels to be Emma. Maybe you have worked jobs where people talked down to you. Maybe you have been invisible, overlooked, dismissed by those who believed your worth could be measured in tips or titles. And maybe, like her, you carried on anyway, choosing decency even when no one was watching. This story is for you, for the people who hold the world together quietly, for the ones who do the right thing, not because it pays, but because it is right. And if you have ever felt like kindness made you weak, I hope this story shows you the truth. Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is integrity wearing soft clothing. It is strength without noise, power without force, courage without applause. Emma lost her job because someone mistook compassion for poor judgment. But compassion was the exact thing that made her irreplaceable. Life is strange that way. Sometimes the qualities that get you punished by the wrong people are the same qualities that get you lifted by the right ones. And that is why her story matters. Because we all face moments when we wonder whether decency is worth the cost, whether standing up for someone makes a difference, Whether anyone sees the effort we pour into the world, someone always sees. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes the right pair of eyes. But goodness is never wasted. If this story stirred something in you, maybe it is because you recognize a piece of your own life reflected inside it. The unfair boss, the coworkers who mocked you, the long nights wondering if anyone truly notices how hard you try. Or maybe you know the other side. Maybe you once doubted someone who deserved better. Maybe you looked away when you should have stepped forward. That does not make you beyond redemption. The beautiful part of Emma's story is that everyone changed, not just her. Jason learned humility. Beth learned empathy. Even Tom, in losing his position, gave space for someone better to rise. That is the truth about kindness. It multiplies. It ripples outward. It turns cold rooms warm and closed hearts soft. And if you feel the world has hardened around you, this is your reminder that one small gesture can begin the thaw. So here is my invitation to you. If this story touched you, let it move you into action. Leave a comment about someone whose kindness shaped your life. Share this with a friend who might need a reminder that compassion still matters. And if you want more stories that lift you, heal you, and remind you of the quiet good still alive in this world, then stay close. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment like this again. Because stories like Emma's are more than entertainment. They are bridges. They are lanterns in dark places. They are reminders that even in a world that sometimes feels divided, dignity and decency still matter. And maybe if we choose to live that way, one small act at a time, we might discover that all of us are capable of changing someone's night, someone's life, and maybe even the world. Thank you for being here. Your heart, your attention, your presence matter more than you know. Let kindness grow wherever you are.